Danielle Walsh's thumb hovered over the delete button when his message appeared on her screen. Something about the way he wrote that made her pause and actually smile, instead of cringing at another awkward pickup line. She had been on dating apps for 3 months now, ever since her best friend Emma had practically forced her to download them after a particularly pathetic Friday night spent eating ice cream and watching romantic comedies alone. The experience had been mostly disappointing. Most guys either led with something crude, or their conversations fizzled out into nothing after a few exchanges. But this one, whose profile said his name was Connor and showed pictures of a guy with warm brown eyes and an easy smile, had opened with a question about the book she was holding in one of her profile photos. "Is that the new Margaret Atwood? I've been trying to get my hands on a copy for weeks, but every bookstore near me is sold out." It was simple, genuine, and showed he had actually looked at her profile instead of just swiping based on her face. Danielle was 26, worked as a physical therapist at a rehabilitation center in downtown Boston, and had nearly given up on finding someone who wanted more than a hookup. She typed back quickly, "It is. I actually just finished it yesterday. It was incredible. There is a great independent bookstore in Cambridge that might still have copies if you are willing to make the trip." His response came within minutes, and soon they were deep in conversation about books, then movies, then somehow ended up debating whether breakfast foods were acceptable for dinner. Connor was funny without trying too hard, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. Over the next 2 weeks, they messaged constantly. Danielle found herself checking her phone between patients, smiling at his messages during her lunch break, staying up later than she should to keep their conversations going. He told her he worked in hospitality management, which explained his sometimes odd hours. He had grown up in New England, loved hiking even though he did not get to do it as often as he would like, and had a younger sister he was clearly devoted to. He asked about her work, seemed fascinated by the stories she told about helping patients regain mobility after accidents or surgeries, and made her laugh with his terrible puns. "I think we should meet," he typed one evening, about 3 weeks into their messaging. "If you are comfortable with that, obviously. No pressure." Danielle's heart jumped. She wanted to meet him, had been thinking about it for days, but there was always that nervousness about whether the person would match the online persona. Still, something about Connor felt different, felt real. "I would like that," she replied. "Coffee sometime this week." They settled on Thursday evening at a small cafe near the Boston Public Garden, a spot Danielle loved for its cozy atmosphere and excellent lattes. She spent way too long getting ready that night, changing outfits 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a soft green sweater that Emma insisted brought out her eyes. Her dark blonde hair refused to cooperate, so she left it down in loose waves and hoped for the best. She arrived 5 minutes early, ordered a latte to calm her nerves, and claimed a small table by the window. Her phone buzzed. "Just parking. Be there in 2 minutes. I am wearing a gray jacket so you can spot me." Danielle's stomach flipped. This was it. She watched the door, taking small sips of her too hot coffee, mentally preparing herself for potential disappointment. Maybe he would be shorter than his photos suggested. Maybe there would be no chemistry in person. Maybe the door opened and her thoughts scattered completely. Connor walked in, and Danielle's first coherent thought was that his photos had not done him justice. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his gray jacket perfectly. His dark hair was slightly windswept, and when his eyes scanned the cafe and landed on her, his entire face lit up with a smile that made her forget to breathe for a second. He walked over with an easy confidence. and as he got closer, Danielle noticed the quality of everything he wore. The jacket was not just gray, it was perfectly tailored, probably cashmere. His jeans were designer, his watch was understated but looked expensive, and his shoes were the kind of leather that probably cost more than her monthly car payment. There was something else too, something she could not quite put her finger on, a certain polish that suggested he was used to nice things. Danielle. His voice was warm and just as appealing in person as she had imagined during their text conversations. Hi. She stood, and he surprised her by pulling her into a gentle hug that felt natural despite this being their first meeting. You look amazing, he said as they sat down. Even better than your photos, which I did not think was possible. She felt her cheeks warm. You too. You look great. Not just great, good, you look good. He grinned at her flustered response. I am going to grab a coffee. Do you want anything else? I am good, thanks. She watched him walk to the counter, noticed the barista's eyes widen slightly when she looked at him, saw the way she became extra attentive when taking his order. When Connor returned with an Americano, he settled into his chair and looked at her with those warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. I have to admit, I was nervous, he said. I have not done this in a while. Online dating in general, actually. It has been almost 2 years since my last relationship. They fell into conversation as easily as they had online, maybe even easier. Connor was attentive, leaning forward when she spoke, asking follow-up questions that showed he was really listening. He told her about a hiking trip he had taken in the White Mountains last fall, and she told him about the half marathon she was training for. An hour passed, then 2, and the cafe began to empty around them. I do not want this to end, Connor admitted as they finally stood to leave. Would you want to get dinner? There is a place a few blocks from here that has incredible Italian food. Danielle knew she should probably say no, should not seem too eager, should follow whatever dating rules Emma was always trying to explain to her, but she did not want the night to end either. I would love that. They walked through the cooling October evening, and Connor asked if she was cold. Before she could answer, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was old-fashioned and sweet, and the jacket was still warm from his body heat and smelled amazing, like cedar and something expensive she could not name. The restaurant he led her to was not what she expected. It was small and intimate, with soft lighting and what looked like a permanently full reservation book. But when Connor spoke to the host, they were immediately shown to a corner table despite the crowd waiting by the door. How did you manage that? Danielle asked once they were seated. Connor hesitated for just a moment. I have been here a few times. They know me. The menu had no prices, which Danielle always found slightly intimidating, but Connor ordered with the ease of someone completely comfortable in expensive restaurants. They shared a bottle of wine that the sommelier recommended, and Connor asked her opinion before ordering appetizers for them to split. Tell me something you have never told anyone else, he said once their food arrived. Danielle twirled pasta on her fork, thinking. I wanted to be a dancer when I was little. Like, seriously wanted it. I did ballet from age 5 to 16, was even accepted into a pre-professional program. But I got injured my junior year of high school, and during my physical therapy, I realized I was more interested in the healing process than in getting back on stage. That injury changed my entire life path, and I have never regretted it, but sometimes I still wonder what if. Do you still dance at all? Sometimes in my apartment when no one is watching, mostly just when I am happy and a good song comes on. She felt vulnerable admitting this. Your turn. Tell me something nobody knows. Connor's expression became more serious. I think people see me and make assumptions about who I am, what I want, what I am capable of. Sometimes I wish I could just be anonymous, you know. Start over somewhere where nobody knows anything about me and just be normal. There was something in his tone that suggested deeper meaning, but before Danielle could ask, he shifted the conversation, asking about her family. She told him about her parents who had retired to Florida, her older brother who was a teacher in Vermont, the niece and nephew she adored. "What about you?" she asked. "You mentioned a sister." "Yeah, Claire, she is 23, just graduated from college. She is the best person I know." His affection was obvious. "She keeps me grounded when things get complicated." "What kind of complications?" Again, that slight hesitation. "Work stuff mostly. Hospitality management can be demanding." They stayed at the restaurant until closing, and when the check came in a black leather folder, Connor took it before Danielle could even reach for her purse. She caught a glimpse of the total and nearly choked on her last sip of wine. $340 for pasta and wine. "Connor, that is too much. Let me pay half." "Absolutely not. I asked you to dinner." His tone left no room for argument, and he handed over a black credit card without even looking at the total. Outside, the October air had turned cold, and Danielle was grateful for his jacket still around her shoulders. They walked slowly back toward where she had parked, neither seeming eager to end the night. "I had an amazing time," Connor said when they reached her car, a 5-year-old Honda Civic that suddenly seemed very shabby compared to the sleek black Mercedes. She noticed him glancing at parked 2 spaces down. "Me too. This was probably the best first date I have ever had." "Probably." He stepped closer and Danielle's breath caught. "I need to step up my game then." "Definitely the best," she corrected, and he smiled. "Can I see you again? Soon?" "How soon? Tomorrow?" He looked almost nervous, asking. "I know that is fast, but I really do not want to wait a week to see you again." Danielle knew she should play it cool, should make him wait, should not seem too available. But she had never been good at playing games, and she did not want to start now. "I have to work until 6, but I am free after that." His smile could have lit up the entire street. "Perfect. I will pick you up from your place at 7. She gave him her address, and he walked her to her driver's door, opening it for her like they were in a different era. Before she got in, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek, his hand gentle on her arm. "Drive safe. Text me when you get home." Danielle nodded, not trusting her voice, and somehow managed to drive back to her apartment in Somerville without getting into an accident, despite her inability to focus on anything but the feeling of his lips on her cheek and the warmth spreading through her chest. She texted him when she got home as promised, and they messaged until she finally forced herself to go to sleep at 1 in the morning, knowing she had patients starting at 8. The next day at work dragged impossibly. Danielle went through the motions with her patients, helping elderly Mrs. Chen work on her knee exercises, coaching young Marcus through his shoulder rehabilitation after a baseball injury, but her mind kept drifting to Connor. Emma stopped by during lunch, and Danielle could not help but tell her everything. "He sounds perfect," Emma said, stealing a grape from Danielle's fruit bowl. "What is the catch? Why does there have to be a catch? Because nobody is that perfect. Great conversation, gorgeous, thoughtful, and he can afford $300 dinners without blinking. Come on, there has to be something." "Maybe there is not," Danielle said defensively. "Maybe he is just a good guy." Emma held up her hands. "I hope you are right. You deserve a good guy, just be careful, okay?" Connor picked her up exactly at 7, and this time he was driving the Mercedes she had noticed the night before. It was immaculate inside, all leather and technology that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. He drove them to the North End, found impossible parking, and took her to a small Italian bakery that he claimed made the best cannoli in Boston. They walked along the harbor, eating pastries and talking as easily as they had the night before. Connor told her about his sister's new job at a nonprofit, and Danielle told him about the elderly patient who had finally walked unassisted for the first time in 8 months and cried with joy. "That must feel incredible," Connor said, "knowing you made that kind of difference in someone's life." "It is the best part of my job. What is the best part of yours?" He thought about it. "The people, honestly. When you work in hospitality, you get to see people on their best days, celebrating anniversaries and promotions and just enjoying life. It reminds you what matters." Over the next 2 weeks, they saw each other 5 more times. Coffee dates that turned into long walks, a movie that neither of them paid much attention to because they were too busy holding hands in the dark theater. Dinner at a Thai place where Connor laughed so hard at one of her stories that he nearly choked on his noodles. But Danielle was starting to notice things that did not quite add up. Connor always paid for everything, always, and never seemed concerned about the cost. When she mentioned a concert she wanted to see that was sold out, tickets somehow appeared. He dressed too well for someone in hospitality management, drove a car that cost more than she made in 2 years, and once she noticed what looked like a driver waiting for him when she surprised him with coffee at what he said was a work meeting. She tried to push the questions aside because everything else was so perfect. Connor was thoughtful and funny, respectful and affectionate. He kissed her for the first time after their 4th date, a slow, perfect kiss in her doorway that made her toes curl. By the 5th date, she was already falling for him, which terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. It was Emma who finally pushed her to address it. They were having drinks at their favorite bar in Somerville, and Danielle was going on about how Connor had surprised her with tickets to a sold-out Broadway show in New York next month, how he had already booked a hotel and said not to worry about the cost. "Danielle, you need to ask him what he actually does," Emma said firmly. "Hospitality managers do not drop thousands of dollars on random weekend trips. They do not drive cars that cost 6 figures. Something is not adding up. Maybe he is just really good at his job. Maybe he has been saving. Stop making excuses. You are falling for this guy, which is great, but you need to know who he actually is. What if he is involved in something illegal? What if he is married and you are the side piece? What if he is lying about everything?" The words stung because Danielle had been having the same thoughts but pushing them away. That night, instead of texting Connor like she usually did, she decided to do something she felt guilty about but could not resist. She Googled him. Connor Hospitality Management Boston did not bring up anything useful. She tried adding his last name, which she realized with a start she did not actually know. He had never told her and she had never asked. How had she not asked? She texted him. "Random question, but I just realized I do not know your last name." His response came quickly. "Vaughn. Sorry, thought I had mentioned it." Danielle stared at her phone. Vaughn. She typed Connor Vaughn Boston into the search bar and her entire world tilted. The first result was a Forbes article. Connor Vaughn, 28, takes hospitality empire to new heights. There was a photo of him in an expensive suit, looking confident and powerful and nothing like the casual guy she had been dating. With shaking hands, she clicked the article and started reading. Connor Vaughn was not just in hospitality management. He owned one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the world, Vaughn International Hotels. His father had built the company, and Connor had taken over as CEO 3 years ago when his father retired. He was worth an estimated $4.7 billion. Billion. With a B. Danielle felt sick. She clicked through more articles, each one revealing more of the truth. Connor on red carpets at charity galas. Connor shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Connor listed as one of the most eligible bachelors in America. Connor photographed stepping out of private jets and attending exclusive events. Every article mentioned his desire for privacy, his tendency to avoid the spotlight despite his wealth and position. Several mentioned that he rarely dated publicly and had not been photographed with anyone romantically in over a year. She sat on her couch, her laptop hot on her thighs, and tried to process what she had learned. Connor was not just wealthy. He was obscenely wealthy, and he had lied to her. Well, not exactly lied, but he certainly had not told her the truth. Her phone buzzed. "I have been thinking about you all day. Cannot wait to see you tomorrow." Danielle stared at the message, anger and confusion swirling in her chest. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, "We need to talk." "That sounds ominous. Everything okay? I will explain tomorrow. What time?" They agreed on lunch at the cafe where they had first met, and Danielle barely slept that night, rehearsing what she would say, how she would confront him. Connor was already there when she arrived, and the smile on his face faltered when he saw her expression. "What is wrong?" He stood as she approached, concern evident. "Why did you lie to me?" She did not sit down, and her voice came out harder than she intended. "What are you talking about? I Googled you, Connor. Or should I call you Mr. Vaughn, CEO of Vaughn International Hotels? Worth nearly $5 billion. That Connor Vaughn." His face went carefully blank, and then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Can we sit, please?" Reluctantly, Danielle sat, and Connor took the chair across from her. "I did not lie to you," he said carefully. "I just did not tell you everything." "That is the same thing." "No, it is not. I told you I worked in hospitality management, which is true. I manage a hospitality company. I just did not mention the scale. You let me think you were a regular guy, Connor. You drove a regular car, wore regular clothes. That car costs $160,000, Danielle. Those were not regular clothes. I tried to dress down, but I do not exactly know how to be someone I am not." She absorbed this, realizing he was right. The signs had all been there. She had just chosen not to see them because she wanted him to be normal. "Why?" she asked, and her voice came out smaller, more hurt. "Why hide this from me?" Connor leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because of this exact reaction. Do you know what it is like to never know if someone likes you for you, or for what you can give them? Every relationship I have ever had has been tainted by money. Women who pretended to love me but really loved what I could buy them. Women who wanted to be photographed with me, to go to exclusive parties, to have access to a lifestyle. When I met you online, you had no idea who I was. You liked me just for me. Do you have any idea how rare that is, how incredible? So you thought you would just keep lying. I was not going to keep it from you forever. I was waiting for the right time, for when I knew that you cared about me enough that this would not change things." "Of course it changes things, Connor." Danielle's voice rose, and a few people in the cafe glanced over. She lowered it to a harsh whisper. "It changes everything. We are from completely different worlds. You are a billionaire who probably has assistants and drivers and staff. I am a physical therapist who shares an apartment with a roommate because I cannot afford to live alone in Boston. You go to galas and charity events with celebrities. I watch Netflix and eat takeout. How can you possibly think we can work? Because I do not care about any of that." He reached across the table and took her hand, and she hated how right it felt. "I do not want someone from my world, Danielle. I want someone real. Someone who sees me as more than a bank account. Someone who makes me laugh and calls me out when I am being ridiculous and cares about helping people walk again more than she cares about designer handbags. I want you." Danielle felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not know if I can do this. I do not know how to be with someone like you. Be with me the same way you have been. Nothing has to change. Everything has already changed." She pulled her hand back. "I need time to think." She left him sitting there and cried in her car for 10 minutes before driving to work. She made it through her afternoon appointments on autopilot, and when Emma called that evening, Danielle told her everything. "Holy shit," Emma breathed. "Connor Vaughn. I am looking him up right now." "Oh my God, Danielle, he is gorgeous. And loaded. Why are you not celebrating? Because he lied to me. Did he, though? Or did he just not mention something that he knew would change everything? Can you honestly tell me that if he had told you on that first date that he was a billionaire, you would have reacted normally? You would have just been your regular self?" Danielle was quiet because Emma was right. If she had known, she would have been different. More guarded, more self-conscious, more aware of every little thing she said and did. "I thought so," Emma said gently. "Look, I get why you are upset, but he has a point. He wanted you to know him, really know him, before the money complicated everything. Is that really so terrible?" "I do not know. I feel like I do not know him at all now." "That is bullshit, and you know it. You know him. You know he is kind and funny and thoughtful. You know he makes you happier than I have seen you in years. The money does not change that, but it did change things." Over the next 3 days, Danielle tried to go back to normal life, but she could not stop thinking about Connor. He texted her several times, never pushy, just asking if she was okay and saying he missed her. She did not respond, and she hated how much that hurt. On the 4th day, a delivery arrived at her work. A simple bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite, with a card that read, "I understand if you need space, but I am not giving up on us. You are worth fighting for." See, Mrs. Chen, her elderly patient, noticed the flowers. From a boyfriend, maybe. "I do not know." "What do you mean you do not know?" Danielle found herself telling the story, leaving out the exact amount of money but explaining the situation. Mrs. Chen listened patiently, then fixed her with a knowing look. "Let me tell you something, dear. My Henry, God rest his soul, came from money. Not like your young man, but his family had wealth. My family were immigrants. We had nothing. When I met Henry, he did not tell me about the money right away, and when I found out, I was angry just like you. Felt like he had made a fool of me. But you know what he said?" "What?" "He said that money was the least interesting thing about him, and if I could not see past it to the man he actually was, then I was not the woman he thought I was. We were married for 52 years, and the money was nice, I will not lie, but it was never what mattered. What mattered was that he made me laugh, that he was kind to my mother, that he cried when our daughter was born. Those are the things you remember." Danielle thought about that all day. That evening, she finally responded to Connor's text. "Can we talk? In person?" His response was immediate. "Anytime, anywhere, you name it." They met at the public garden at sunset. Connor was sitting on a bench near the pond, and he stood when he saw her approaching. He looked tired, and Danielle felt a pang of guilt. "I am sorry," she said before he could speak. "I overreacted." "No, you did not. You had every right to be upset. I should have told you sooner." They sat down together, leaving a careful space between them that felt wrong. "I spent the last few days being angry," Danielle admitted. "But mostly I was scared. Scared that I am not enough for your world. Scared that I will embarrass you or not fit in, or that eventually you will realize you could be with someone who actually belongs in that life." Connor turned to face her fully. "I have been to 1,000 parties with people who belong in that life, and I have never connected with any of them the way I connect with you. Do you know what I do most evenings?" sit in an apartment that cost more money than I want to think about and wish I was talking to you. The business, the money, the lifestyle, none of it means anything if I am doing it alone. You make me feel like a normal person, Danielle. You make me feel real. But I am not part of your world. Then we will build our own world. One where I am just Connor and you are just Danielle, and we get to be together without all the other stuff mattering. It will matter eventually. Your business, your family, the media, my sister already knows about you. I told Claire after our third date. She has been dying to meet you, and the media only matters if I let it matter. I have spent 3 years keeping my private life private. I can keep doing that. Danielle looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the vulnerability in his eyes. He was scared too, she realized, scared of losing her. I really like you, she said softly. I have not felt this way about anyone in a long time, maybe ever, but I need you to be honest with me from now on, about everything. No more omissions or half-truths. If we are going to try this, I need to really know you. I can do that. I will do that. He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. Ask me anything, right now, whatever you want to know. Okay. She thought for a moment. Where do you live? I have a penthouse in Back Bay, 15,000 square feet. It is honestly too big for one person, and I rattle around in it like a ghost. I also have a house on the Cape that I never use because I am always working. What is a typical day like for you? Wake up at 5:30, work out with my personal trainer, get to the office by 7. Meetings most of the day, calls with hotel managers around the world, dealing with whatever crisis has popped up. I try to leave by 7 at night, but it is usually closer to 9. Eat dinner alone while catching up on emails. Go to bed around midnight. It is boring and lonely if I am being honest. It does not sound boring. It sounds overwhelming. It is both. I love the work, building something, making sure our hotels give people incredible experiences. But the higher I have climbed, the lonelier it has gotten. Everyone wants something from me. Everyone except you. They talked until the park closed, and by the time Connor walked her to her car, Danielle felt like she was finally seeing the complete picture of who he was. Not just the guy she had been dating, not just the billionaire CEO, but the whole complicated person. So where do we go from here? She asked as they stood by her car. Forward, I hope, if you are willing. He stepped closer and Danielle's breath caught. I have missed you so much the last few days. I missed you too. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Danielle let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Over the next month, they settled into a new normal. Connor was more open about his life, and Danielle worked on not being intimidated by it. He took her to his penthouse, which was indeed massive and gorgeous and slightly impersonal. Like a hotel suite, no one had bothered to fully move into. They cooked dinner together in his kitchen that was bigger than her entire apartment, and Connor admitted he barely knew how to use half the appliances. I have a chef who comes in when I have business dinners, he explained, looking embarrassed. I usually just order in or eat at the office. That is depressing, Danielle declared. We are going to fix that. She started teaching him to cook, simple things at first. They made pasta from scratch, roasted chicken with vegetables, her grandmother's recipe for soup. Connor was a terrible cook but an enthusiastic student, and Danielle loved seeing him relaxed and casual in jeans and a t-shirt, flour on his nose, laughing when he inevitably messed something up. He introduced her to Claire, his sister, over brunch one Sunday. Claire was funny and warm and immediately pulled Danielle into a hug. Thank God, she said dramatically. A normal person. Do you know how worried I have been that Connor would end up with some Instagram model who only cares about his money? Claire, Connor warned, but he was smiling. What? It is true. You have terrible taste in women. Well, you did. This one I like. They spent 3 hours at brunch, and Danielle found herself genuinely liking Claire. She was studying to be a teacher and was passionate about education reform. She told embarrassing stories about Connor as a kid, and he pretended to be annoyed but clearly loved the attention. "He is crazy about you," Claire told Danielle when Connor went to pay the check. "I have never seen him like this. Happy. Real. Thank you for that." Danielle also started to understand the challenges that came with Connor's life. The paparazzi who occasionally caught them leaving restaurants. The constant security presence that Connor insisted on when they went to certain places. The way people treated him differently once they knew who he was, suddenly obsequious and eager to please. But there were perks too. When Danielle mentioned wanting to see Hamilton, Connor made a call and they had orchestra seats the next week. When her favorite author was doing a reading in New York, Connor arranged for them to fly down on a private jet, meet the author, and be back in Boston the same night. It was excessive and amazing, and Danielle tried not to feel guilty about enjoying it. "You do not have to feel bad about this," Connor told her as they flew back to Boston, the city lights spreading below them. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. If I can use it to make you happy, why would I not? Because it is too much. Because I cannot reciprocate. Because I feel like I am taking advantage." "You are not taking advantage. You are letting me spoil you, which is different. And you reciprocate in ways that matter so much more. You make me dinner. You remember that I hate tomatoes but love tomato sauce. You send me funny memes in the middle of the day just because you know they will make me smile. You care about me, not about what I can buy you. That is everything." By their 3-month anniversary, Danielle had fallen completely in love with him, and she was pretty sure he felt the same way, though neither of them had said the words yet. Connor planned something special, refusing to tell her what, just saying to pack for a weekend away and bring something nice to wear. A car picked her up Friday afternoon, and she expected to be driven to the airport for another private jet adventure. Instead, they drove to the Cape, to the house Connor had mentioned but she had never seen. It was stunning. Right on the ocean, all glass and wood and contemporary design that somehow felt warm rather than cold. Connor was waiting on the deck, and he pulled her into a long kiss when she arrived. "Welcome. I wanted to have you all to myself this weekend." He had arranged for a private chef to prepare dinner, which they ate on the deck as the sun set over the water. Later, they walked on the beach, and Connor stopped where the waves were lapping at the sand. "I need to tell you something," he said, and Danielle's heart jumped. "Okay, I am in love with you. I have been for weeks, but I was scared to say it, scared it was too soon or that I would scare you off. But I cannot keep it in anymore. I love you, Danielle. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me." Danielle felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too, so much. I was scared to say it first because I thought maybe this was all just fun for you. Maybe I was just different and interesting," but he kissed her before she could finish. "You are not just different. You are everything." They made love that night in his beautiful house, with the sound of the waves through the open windows, and Danielle felt more content than she had ever felt in her life. The next morning, over coffee on the deck, Connor brought up something she had been wondering about. "I want you to meet my parents. They are back from their trip to Europe next week, and I have told them about you." "What did you tell them?" "That I am in love with someone amazing, and that I need them to be on their best behavior because I cannot lose you." "You told them you cannot lose me." "I meant it. I know it has only been a few months, but I have never been more sure of anything. You are it for me, Danielle." Meeting his parents was terrifying. They invited Danielle and Connor to dinner at their estate in Wellesley, and Danielle spent way too much money on a new dress, because she wanted to make a good impression. The estate was even more impressive than Connor's penthouse. Old money wealth, with manicured grounds and a house that looked like something out of a magazine. But Richard and Catherine Vaughn turned out to be warm and welcoming, if a bit formal. "We are so pleased to finally meet you," Catherine said, kissing Danielle's cheek. "Connor has told us so much." Dinner was in a dining room that could have seated 20, but it was just the four of them, which somehow made it more intimate. Richard asked about her work and seemed genuinely interested when she explained about physical therapy. Catherine wanted to know how they met and laughed when Connor blushed slightly, telling the story of their online matching. "I think it is wonderful," Catherine said, "that you got to know each other as people first, without all the complications." After dinner, Richard pulled Connor aside and Catherine took Danielle out to the garden. "I hope we did not overwhelm you," Catherine said as they walked among the roses. "I know this world can be intimidating if you are not used to it." "It is definitely different from what I grew up with," Danielle admitted. "But Connor makes it easier. He does not make me feel like I do not belong." "That is because you do belong. Not to this world necessarily, but with him. I can see how happy you make him. He has been lost the last few years, buried in work, never taking time for himself. You have brought him back to life." When they rejoined the men, Richard gave Danielle a warm hug. "Welcome to the family," he said simply, and Danielle realized she was crying. As their relationship deepened, they had to navigate challenges. The media eventually figured out who Danielle was, and there were some uncomfortable articles speculating about her intentions. She made the mistake of reading the comments on one gossip site and spent an hour crying about strangers calling her a gold digger. Connor was furious when he found out. He immediately had his publicist release a statement about respecting his privacy, threatened legal action against the worst offenders, and held Danielle while she cried. "I am so sorry," he said. "This is the part I hate. The invasion, the speculation, the cruelty. If I could protect you from it, I would. It is not your fault. I just did not expect people to be so mean. They do not even know me. They do not want to know you. They just want a story. But anyone who actually meets you falls in love with you just like I did." There were also practical challenges. Coordinating schedules when Connor might get called to London or Singapore with a day's notice. Navigating the differences in their daily lives. The guilt Danielle sometimes felt about accepting expensive gifts or experiences when she could not possibly reciprocate at the same level, but they worked through it. Connor learned to delegate more, to trust his team to handle things so he could have time for his personal life. Danielle learned to accept that Connor's love language was gifts and experiences, and that letting him treat her was not taking advantage, but rather letting him show love in the way that felt natural to him. 6 months into their relationship, Connor asked her to move in with him. They were in her apartment in Somerville, which he had started staying at more and more despite it being a fraction of the size of his penthouse. "I love it here," he explained. "It feels like a real home. You have made it so warm and comfortable. My place is just a sterile box. But I want us to have our own space together. We could find something new, something we both love, or you could move into the penthouse and we could make it actually feel like a home. Whatever you want." Danielle thought about it for a week. Her lease was up in 2 months, and the idea of living with Connor made her heart race with excitement and nerves in equal measure. "If I move in, I want to pay rent," she finally said. "Danielle, I own the building. I am not charging you rent." "Then I will pay utilities or groceries or something. I need to contribute. Otherwise, I will feel like I am being kept, and I cannot do that." They compromised. Danielle would not pay rent, but she would be responsible for groceries and cooking most meals, something she enjoyed and Connor clearly needed. She moved in on a rainy Saturday in April, and by Sunday night, the penthouse already felt different. More lived in, more like a home. Connor's friends initially were wary of Danielle, viewing her through the lens of all his past relationships. But she won them over gradually. At a charity gala Connor dragged her to, she ended up in a long conversation with his best friend Marcus about physical therapy techniques for Marcus's father, who was recovering from a stroke. At a business dinner, she charmed his most difficult board member by debating the merits of various authors. Slowly, they realized she was not after Connor's money, but actually cared about him. The turning point came at Connor's 29th birthday party. His mother had planned a lavish affair at their estate, and Danielle had been stressed for weeks about it. She had no idea what to get him because what do you buy a billionaire? Everything she thought of seemed inadequate or impersonal. In the end, she made him something. She spent weeks on it, working in secret while he was at the office. She compiled photos from their relationship, screenshots of their early text conversations, ticket stubs from their dates, and created a scrapbook documenting their story. On the last page, she wrote a letter telling him everything he meant to her, how he had changed her life, how grateful she was that he had been brave enough to message her that day. At the party, Connor opened elaborate gifts from family and friends. Designer watches, expensive art, luxury items that probably cost more than her car. When he got to her gift, wrapped simply in brown paper, she almost told him to open it later privately. But he opened it there, and she watched his face as he flipped through the pages. His eyes got shiny, and when he finished reading her letter, he looked up at her with such love that her breath caught. "This is the best gift anyone has ever given me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Then he stood up in front of all his family and friends and announced, "I am going to marry this woman." The room erupted in applause and laughter, and Danielle felt her face flame red. Connor pulled her into a kiss that was probably too passionate for the audience, but she did not care. He proposed for real 2 months later. They were back at the Cape House, having a quiet dinner on the deck, when Connor got down on one knee. "Danielle Walsh, you are the most genuine, kind, incredible person I have ever met. You saw past everything else and loved me for who I actually am. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me?" The ring was stunning, a simple solitaire diamond that caught the sunset and threw rainbows across the deck. But Danielle barely looked at it because she was too busy saying yes and throwing her arms around Connor's neck and crying happy tears. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony on the beach at the Cape. Claire was Danielle's maid of honor, and Marcus was Connor's best man. Both sets of parents were there, along with Emma and a few dozen close friends and family. It was intimate and perfect, nothing like the society wedding Catherine had initially tried to plan. Connor cried when he saw Danielle walking toward him in her simple white dress, barefoot in the sand. They wrote their own vows, and Connor promised to always see her as his equal, to never let money or business come before their relationship, to build a life full of real moments instead of empty luxury. Danielle promised to love him through the challenges of his public life, to keep him grounded, to always remind him of what truly mattered. Their honeymoon was 3 weeks in Italy, staying in small family-owned hotels instead of Vaughan properties, being anonymous and normal and blissfully happy. When they returned to Boston, they started building their life together. Connor scaled back his work hours, bringing on a president of operations so he could focus on strategy instead of day-to-day management. Danielle continued working at the rehabilitation center, though Connor offered multiple times to let her retire or open her own practice. "I love my job," she told him. "I love helping people. Why would I give that up?" "I just want you to have options," he said. "I have all the options I need. I have work that fulfills me and a husband I love. What else could I want?" 2 years into their marriage, Danielle found out she was pregnant. She told Connor over breakfast in their kitchen, the one room of the penthouse she had completely redecorated to feel warm and lived in. He stared at the pregnancy test for a full minute before picking her up and spinning her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating like he could not quite believe it. Their daughter, Emma Catherine Vaughn, was born on a snowy December morning. Connor held her and cried, and Danielle fell in love all over again watching her strong, capable husband become completely undone by a 7-pound baby. "She is perfect," he whispered. "You are both perfect." Connor was an amazing father, somehow finding time in his demanding schedule to be present for every milestone. He did midnight feedings and diaper changes, played on the floor with Emma for hours, and absolutely refused to let nannies raise his daughter even though they could afford an entire staff. "I did not wait this long to have a family just to miss it," he said, when Danielle suggested hiring help. When Emma was 2, they bought a house in Brookline. Something smaller than the estate Connor had grown up in, but with a big yard for Emma to play in and enough space for the family they hoped to grow. The penthouse became Connor's pied-à-terre for late work nights, but home was now the house filled with Emma's toys and laughter, and the smell of Danielle's cooking. Connor continued to run Vaughn International, but he approached it differently now. He prioritized work-life balance, not just for himself, but for all his employees. He started programs for parental leave, flexible scheduling, and mental health support. Under his leadership, the company thrived not despite these changes but because of them. Danielle eventually did open her own practice, a rehabilitation center that accepted patients regardless of their ability to pay. Connor helped fund it, but it was her vision and passion that made it successful. She hired a team of therapists who shared her commitment to serving underserved communities, and within 3 years, they had helped hundreds of patients regain mobility and independence. They had a son, Henry, 3 years after Emma was born. Their family felt complete. The 4 of them spent weekends at the Cape, holidays at Connor's parents' estate, and everyday moments in their Brookline home. They were not a perfect family, but they were happy. Sometimes Danielle still thought about that first date, walking into the cafe nervous and hopeful. She thought about how close she had come to deleting Connor's profile, to never giving him a chance, to missing out on the greatest love of her life because she was tired of being disappointed. "What are you thinking about?" Connor asked one evening. They were on the deck at the Cape, watching Emma and Henry play in the sand while the sun set over the water. "How lucky I am. How different my life could have been if we had never matched that day." Connor pulled her closer. "I was not taking any chances. I would have found you somehow." "Oh, really? How? I do not know. Maybe I would have shown up at that bookstore in Cambridge you told me about, pretended to need recommendations until you noticed me. That is basically stalking. That is determination. There is a difference." He kissed her temple. "But I am glad I did not have to. I am glad you gave me a chance even though I was hiding the truth. I am glad you took the risk of being honest with me, even though you were scared. We would not have made it if you had not. Best decision I ever made. Well, second best. What was the first?" "Messaging you in the first place. Asking about that book. Everything good in my life stems from that moment." Danielle turned to kiss him properly, and in the distance, Emma shrieked with laughter as Henry knocked over her sandcastle. Connor pulled away to go mediate, and Danielle watched her family with a contentment so deep it almost hurt. She had never expected to fall in love with a billionaire. She had just wanted to meet someone kind and real, someone who would see her and love her for who she was. That she found that in Connor Vaughn, heir to a hotel empire, was simply proof that love showed up in the most unexpected places. Years later, when Emma asked how they met, Connor always told the truth. He explained how he had created a profile that did not mention his family or his business, how he had wanted someone to know him before they knew about the money. He talked about being nervous on that first date, about falling in love over coffee and conversation. "Did Mommy love you because you were rich?" Emma asked once when she was 8. "No," Danielle answered firmly. "I loved your father because he was kind and funny and made me feel seen. The money was actually a problem at first." "Why?" Connor fielded that one. "Because money changes things. It makes people treat you differently, makes them want things from you instead of wanting you. But your mom never wanted anything from me except my time and my heart. That is how I knew she was the one." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to her homework. Later, after the kids were in bed, Connor found Danielle in their bedroom. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "The scrutiny, the pressure, having to deal with the business side of my life." "Never. Do you?" "Not for a second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even better than inheriting billions of dollars. Not even close. Money is just money. You are my life." They celebrated their 10th anniversary by recreating their first date. Connor picked her up at the same time. They went to the same cafe, sat at the same table if possible. The barista who had served them 10 years ago had moved on, but the coffee was just as good. "I was so nervous that night," Danielle admitted. "I thought you would be disappointing in person. And was I terrifying? You were so handsome and confident, and I was convinced I was not good enough for you. I was terrified, too. I thought you would figure out who I was and everything would change. I wanted so badly for you to like me. I did like you. I liked you so much it scared me. And then when I found out the truth, I felt like I had been tricked. I know. I should have told you sooner." They had had this conversation before, many times over the years, but it felt important to revisit it, to remember where they had come from and how far they had traveled together. After coffee, Connor drove them to the public garden, to the bench where Danielle had told him she wanted to try. They sat there as the sun set, holding hands, and Connor pulled out his phone. "I want to show you something. I found this the other day when I was cleaning out old files." He pulled up a screenshot of Danielle's dating profile from 10 years ago. "This is what I saw that day. This is what made me message you." Danielle looked at her younger self, smiling at the camera, holding that Margaret Atwood book. She looked hopeful and open, ready for something good to finally happen. "I almost deleted the app that day," she admitted. "I was so tired of bad dates and guys who only wanted one thing. But something made me check one more time, and there you were." "Fate," Connor said simply. "You do not believe in fate. I believe in us. That is close enough." They went home to their kids and their life, and Danielle thought about all the moments that had led them here. The swipe right, the first message, the decision to meet in person. Connor's choice to hide his identity, her choice to give him another chance after finding out the truth. 1,000 small decisions that had built this beautiful life. That night, after the kids were asleep and they were getting ready for bed, Connor pulled her close. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For seeing past everything else, for loving me anyway, for building this life with me, for giving me Emma and Henry, for being you. Thank you for taking the chance, for being brave enough to be vulnerable, for choosing me. I will always choose you." And he did, every day for the rest of their lives. Through business challenges and family drama, through raising kids and building careers, through every up and down that life threw at them. They chose each other, again and again, and that choice made all the difference. 20 years after that first date, Connor and Danielle sat on their deck at the Cape, watching their grandchildren play in the sand. Emma had grown up to be a teacher like her aunt, passionate and dedicated. Henry had surprised everyone by becoming a chef, opening a restaurant that was getting incredible reviews. "We did good," Connor said, watching their family with satisfaction. "We did," Danielle agreed. She thought about the girl she had been, swiping through dating apps, hoping for someone real. She thought about Connor hiding in plain sight, desperate to be loved for himself. She thought about how easily they could have missed each other, how many things had to align perfectly for them to find each other. But they had found each other. And everything that came after that swipe right, every challenge and joy and moment of love, had been worth it. Connor squeezed her hand, and Danielle smiled. Their love story had started with a lie of omission, but it had grown into something completely true. Something real and lasting, and worth every moment of doubt and fear they had faced. She would not change a single thing.